The roads between Halifax and Truro are quiet at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night, and I had been driving them for 4 hours. Not because anything dramatic happened on the flight. The Halifax flight was fine. WestJet, window seat, ginger ale I didn't finish. No, I'd been driving because I missed my connector out of Toronto, spent 3 hours in Pearson watching my gate number cycle through delays, and finally landed close enough to home that renting a car made more sense than spending another night in an airport hotel with thin walls. And a minibar I'd definitely regret. I'm Evan Morrow, 29 years old. I write technical copy for a software company out of Dartmouth, which sounds like a real job until someone asks me to explain it at a family dinner and I watch their eyes go polite. Mostly, I translate what engineers build into language that won't make customers feel stupid. It's useful work. It doesn't sound useful. I've made peace with that. I'd been in Vancouver for a week on site with a client. The kind of trip where you spend Sunday evening telling yourself, it'll be a quick one, and then Friday arrives, and you're still there, reaching your return flight on a laptop balanced on a hotel bathtub because the Wi-Fi doesn't reach the desk chair. I pulled into the driveway of the house I rent half of just past 11:15. It's a 2-unit semi-detached in a quiet part of Truro, the kind of street where people still rake their own leaves and wave at neighbors they actually know. I pay $1,200 a month for the upstairs unit. My downstairs neighbor Margot, wait, no, I need to back up. Her name is Reeve Aldridge. 27 years old, elementary school art teacher, catastrophically good at parallel parking, and the reason I learned to buy 2 kinds of milk because she thinks 2% is a moral failing. I moved into the upstairs unit 14 months ago after my last apartment flooded from a burst pipe in February, and my landlord handled it by sending a guy with a shop vac and a shrug. Reeve had lived downstairs for 2 years already. When I came to look at the place, she was sitting on the front steps eating an apple and reading a library book about the geological history of Nova Scotia. Because that's who she is. She looked up and said, "The bathroom exhaust fan is loud, the kitchen faucet runs hot before it runs warm, and the guy next door snowblows at 7 a.m., but only in one direction. So you still have to shovel your walk." I moved in 4 days later. 14 months is long enough to know things. I knew she graded papers on Sunday afternoons with the specific posture of someone carrying a quiet grievance. I knew she kept her front light on when she was home and off when she wasn't, which I told myself I noticed for safety reasons. I knew she had a habit of leaving small things outside my door. A spare lime when she'd bought too many, a sticky note once that said the upstairs bathroom light was flickering from the outside. Once a piece of coffee cake wrapped in wax paper with no explanation and no expectation, which was somehow more unsettling than either of those other things. I had rules about Reeve, not spoken ones, just the kind you build quietly over months, of sharing a porch and a recycling schedule and the particular low-frequency hum of knowing someone lives 12 feet below you. No flirting, no reading into things. No standing in the driveway on a Tuesday night, pretending to check your phone when you can hear her music through the floor. I broke the third rule regularly. The house was dark when I pulled in. Reeve's car was there, which meant she was home, which meant her front light should have been on. It wasn't. That was the first thing I noticed. The second thing I noticed was that her door was open. Not wide open, not kicked in, just unlatched, swinging slightly in the November wind, a thin line of warm light coming from inside. I sat in the car for a moment. 11:15 on a Thursday. An open door, no porch light. I knew 3 things about Reeve. She locked her door every night, she had no family nearby, and she had mentioned exactly once, offhand, that her sister was going through something difficult. In Edmonton, in the tone people use when they mean they're also going through something difficult and don't want to say so. I got out of the car. I knocked on the frame because it felt wrong to just walk in, even with the door already open. Nothing. I knocked again. Then I heard her voice from somewhere inside, muffled, the tone of someone on the phone in a room with the door half closed. I pushed the door open wider and said her name. The sound stopped. Footsteps. And then Reeve appeared in the hallway wearing paint-stained overalls, hair pulled back, one hand holding her phone to her chest. She looked at me. Her eyes were red at the edges. "I thought you were in Vancouver," she said. "I got back early. Your door was open." She looked at the door like she'd forgotten it existed. I must have not caught the latch. She swallowed. "I'm okay. I didn't ask. Her jaw shifted. You have that face. What face? The one where you're deciding whether to say something. I said, is everything all right? She pressed her lips together, shook her head once, barely, then said, my brother is here. I did not know she had a brother. In 14 months, she had mentioned a sister in Edmonton, a mother in New Brunswick who called every Sunday at 2 p.m. on the dot, a father she described once as having the emotional vocabulary of a weather report. She had never mentioned a brother. I said so. We don't really. She started, stopped, tried again. I haven't seen him in almost 3 years. He showed up tonight, 2 hours ago. No call, text, just. She glanced toward the back of the apartment. Just here. Is he? He's not dangerous. She said it quickly. He's just. A lot. A pause. He wants to stay for a week. For our mom's birthday, which is Sunday. And he apparently told our mom he'd already arranged somewhere to stay in Truro. Which is, her voice thinned for a moment. Which is exactly the kind of thing he does. He creates facts and then waits for everyone to catch up to them. From down the hall, a door opened. A man appeared who was clearly Reeve's brother in the way that feels both obvious and strange. Same brown eyes, same stubborn set to the jaw, but where Reeve was careful, this man had the posture of someone who had never once in his life been wrong about something. He was maybe 32, 2 days of stubble, a canvas jacket that had seen weather. Hey, he said to me with the easy confidence of someone comfortable in a space that wasn't his. Fletcher, I said, even. Fletcher's eyes moved between me and Reeve in the particular way of a person doing math. You're the upstairs tenant? Yes. He nodded slowly. Good timing. He looked at Reeve. I was just saying you shouldn't be alone with a landlord situation, Reeve said. He's not my landlord, Fletch, right? But you rent from? He lives upstairs. We're neighbors. Fletcher looked at me again. Just neighbors? Reeve's expression was perfectly still. I knew that stillness. I'd seen it when she got a call from her mother that went sideways, when the school board sent a memo she disagreed with, when someone said something she was choosing not to answer. It was the stillness of someone deciding how much to spend. She said, Even, I'm sorry about the door. You should get some sleep. You've been traveling, which was the clearest possible signal that she wanted me to leave. I almost left. I had my keys in my hand. I was 2 steps back toward the exit, my body already doing the reasonable thing. Then Fletcher said casually, like a man dropping a rock into still water, Mom's going to love hearing Reeve still in the same place. Same job, same situation. At least one of us stayed consistent. He smiled. It was a kind-looking smile. It was not a kind smile. Reeve said nothing, but her hand tightened around her phone. I said, sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but… Reeve, didn't you say your boyfriend was coming back this weekend? The sentence surprised both of us. I watched it land in the room. Fletcher blinked. Reeve's eyes cut to mine, and in them there was something I hadn't expected. Not irritation, not panic. Something more like relief, gone almost immediately, replaced by very careful neutrality. She said, I did mention that. Fletcher said, boyfriend? I said, hi, I'm Evan. A pause. Her boyfriend, I added, in the tone of a man who has just committed to something and is choosing to stay committed. The silence was about 4 seconds long. Reeve coughed. Fletcher looked at me with fresh attention. I looked at Fletcher with what I hoped was the relaxed confidence of a man who had not just invented a relationship from scratch in a stranger's hallway. You live upstairs, Fletcher said. I do. And you're dating. We are, I said. It's a recent development. I glanced at Reeve. She was looking at me the way you look at someone who has just pulled a fire alarm in a building that was actually on fire. Grateful. Horrified. Uncertain whether to hug them or run. Fletcher said, huh. He looked at Reeve. She looked back at him without flinching. She said, Even just got back from a week in Vancouver. He's tired. We can all catch up tomorrow. She looked at me. Right? I said, right. I went upstairs. I had been standing in my kitchen for approximately 45 seconds, still in my coat, still holding my laptop bag, when I heard a soft knock at my door. The inside door, the one at the top of the stairs that connects to the shared entry. I opened it. Reeve stood on the landing in her socks. I owe you an explanation, she said. You don't. I owe you an apology then. For what? For not correcting you. Her arms were crossed, not defensively, more like she was holding herself together. I should have said something. I could have said something, but he was doing that thing he does where he… She stopped. I'm sorry. I put you in an uncomfortable position. I said, did it help? She looked at me. What? Did it help? When I said it, she exhaled. It stopped him from finishing the sentence he was going to say. What sentence was that? Something about how I'm still. She stopped again. He does this thing. He doesn't say hard things directly. He says them sideways, and then if you react, he acts like you overreacted. It's very efficient. I set my bag down on the floor. How long's he here for? He says a week. He'll stay in my spare room. She looked exhausted. Mom's birthday is Sunday. There's a dinner. Family friends, her book club, a few cousins. She paused. He's going to be there. Your brother and Thomas. She said the name like it tasted stale. Thomas is my ex. He and Fletcher are still. They stayed close after. She waved a hand. It's a long story. I thought, I have 14 months of evidence that Reeve does not tell long stories unless she trusts you completely. I also thought, Thomas is presumably the kind of ex who shows up at family dinners with mutual friends and a proprietary smile, and I already disliked him without having met him. I said, what happens if your mother finds out we're not? I'll handle it. I'll tell him tomorrow I thought about it, and I don't want to complicate things. She looked at the floor. I shouldn't have let it go on this long. You've been awake for how many hours? A lot, right? She uncrossed her arms. I'm sorry, Evan, really. I said, Reeve. She looked up. I came home to an open door, and you with red eyes at 11 on a Thursday night. The complications is already here. I paused. I'm not taking it back. She was very still. You don't have to. I know. He'll ask questions. Probably my mother will definitely ask questions. She's extremely thorough. I've met thorough mothers. Something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, not quite relief. Somewhere between the two. You'd be doing me a significant favor. Good. You can owe me a coffee cake. This time she did smile. Small, tired, real. I have one in the freezer from last week. Then we're even before we start. She stood on the landing for a moment longer. Okay. But if you change your mind in the morning, I won't. She went back downstairs. I stood in my kitchen for another minute, wondering what, exactly, I had signed up for, and finding that I was not particularly worried about it. The morning was Fletcher asking careful, pointed questions over eggs he made without being invited to use Reeve's kitchen, and Reeve answering them with the measured patience of a person diffusing something they'd diffused many times before. I showed up at 8 because Reeve had texted at 7:53. He's up. Moral support appreciated if you've eaten. I ate a granola bar in the car because the car is 12 feet from her door and some things can be sacrificed for timing. Fletcher was, I'll say this for him, not stupid. He asked questions that sounded casual and landed somewhere else entirely. When did you two start? How long have you lived there? Does she know about your work trips? Do you find it works, living that close? The last question had 3 meanings and he knew it, and I knew it, and Reeve sat beside me drinking her tea like a woman listening to weather forecasts about a storm already overhead. Under the table, her knee was pressed lightly against mine. I don't think she noticed she'd done it. I covered her hand on the table. She stilled for a moment, then turned her hand over under mine. That was hers, not for the room. Fletcher saw it. Something in his expression recalibrated. Not softer, exactly. More like a man who had walked into a negotiation expecting one thing and found another. Sunday arrived with the particular crispness of a Nova Scotia November that has decided to be beautiful about it. Reeve's mother lived 20 minutes outside of Truro in a house with a covered porch and a garden put to bed for winter, the kind of place that looks like it knows things. Her name was Carolyn, and within 4 minutes of meeting her, I understood where Reeve had gotten both her sharpness and her warmth, because Carolyn had both and deployed them with the calm efficiency of someone who had been running a household on her own terms for a long time. She looked at me, then at Reeve, then back at me. You live upstairs, she said. I do, and this is recent. We got here eventually, I said. Carolyn made a sound that was not quite a laugh. I suppose that's honest. She handed me a dish to carry inside without further ceremony, which I took as a sign of provisional acceptance. The birthday dinner was 14 people in a house built for 8, the particular Nova Scotia version of a family gathering, where the kitchen is the center of everything, and no one is ever quite sure which conversation they're in. Reeve moved through it with the practiced ease of someone who knew the layout and the people and the specific politics of where to stand during certain conversations. I stayed close enough to be useful, far enough not to crowd her. Once, Across the room, she caught my eye, and I raised my eyebrows. She shook her head slightly. I'm fine. I nodded. Thomas arrived 45 minutes in. He was exactly what I'd expected, and also somehow worse. Tall, good-looking in the way that a certain kind of man uses without being aware of it, carrying a bottle of wine he'd chosen to impress, rather than because he knew Carolyn's taste. He hugged Fletcher. He said hello to Carolyn, in the tone of a man maintaining a relationship he found useful. Then he turned and saw Reeve. Reeve. He smiled. You look great, thank you, she said, the way you say thank you to someone handing you something you didn't ask for. His gaze shifted to me. And this is Evan, I said. I held out my hand. He took it with the particular grip of a man who thinks handshakes are information. Right, he said. I heard. He looked between us. Good for you two. He said it like he was granting something. I watched Reeve's expression remain perfectly polite and thought about how much practice that took. Dinner was loud and good, and full of the specific warmth of people who have known each other for decades. Carolyn told a story about Reeve at 11 years old that made the table laugh and made Reeve cover her face. Fletcher was more subdued across the table. Thomas sat 2 seats away and twice tried to start a parallel conversation with Reeve that she redirected graciously and without making it obvious that she was redirecting it. At some point, Carolyn refilled my wine and said quietly, "She doesn't bring people home." I said, "I know." Carolyn looked at me steadily. "That matters. I know that too." She nodded once like a sentence had been finished and moved on to someone else. After dinner, Fletcher found me in the hallway near the Coates. He had his hands in his pockets and his voice was lower than it had been all weekend. "She was pretty bad," he said. "After Thomas. I wasn't around as much as I should have been. Work, distance." He paused. Various excuses. He looked at me. "I'm not trying to make a speech, she matters more than I've been acting like she does." I said, "I know she does." He looked at the floor. "You're good with her." "I'm trying to be." Fletcher nodded. Then he held out his hand and I shook it, and it was nothing like the handshake with Thomas. This one meant something different. We drove home in the dark, just the two of us, Reeve in the passenger seat with her head leaned against the window. The highway was quiet. CBC radio played low. She had her shoes off and one foot tucked under her. Halfway home, she said, "You talked to Fletcher. A little, what did he say? That he hasn't been great at showing up. That he's working on it." She was quiet for a moment. "He said that?" "In fewer words. Approximately the same meaning." She exhaled slowly. He's not." She stopped. "He's complicated. He's been better and worse, and then better again. This whole weekend I kept waiting for the thing he was actually here to do, and I don't think there was one. I think he just came." She sounded slightly undone by this, which is a strange thing to find harder than the alternative. I said, "Sometimes the thing you prepared for not happening is harder than the thing itself." She turned her head from the window and looked at me. "When did you get good at that?" "I'm a technical writer. I translate complicated things into cleaner language." A small laugh. She looked back out the window. "What happens now?" she said, "with us?" She gestured. "With what this weekend was." I said, "That depends on whether you want to keep pretending." The highway curved, the radio murmured. I could feel her looking at me. She said, "What if I don't?" I said, "Then I'd say the same thing I would have said 14 months ago if I hadn't been so committed to minding my own business." "Which is?" I glanced at her once, then back at the road. "That I bought 2 kinds of milk because you prefer it. That I fixed your porch step last spring before you even knew it was loose. That I have rearranged my Thursday evening exactly 4 times this year because I could hear that you were having a hard day through the floor and I didn't want to leave the building." The car was very quiet. "You rearranged your Thursdays," she said. "I said I was bad at minding my own business. You said the opposite," I lied. She made a sound. It was almost a laugh and also something else. "Evan?" "Yeah, I kept the coffee cake excuse ready for a month before I needed it." I looked at her. "The one you left at my door. I baked 2. I ate one and thought, this is a reasonable reason to knock on his door. Then I thought, that's a ridiculous reason to knock on someone's door. Then I thought, I have to do something with this second cake. So it was a contingency plan. It was an act of cowardice dressed up as baked goods." A pause. "I was scared. I am scared." She turned in her seat. "We live 12 feet apart, Evan. If this is wrong, one of us has to move, and I like my apartment, and also I like you, and those two things feel precarious to hold at the same time. I said, I know, but I don't want to keep pretending either. I reached across the center console and held out my hand, palm up. She looked at it. Then she put her hand in mine. We drove the rest of the way home like that. Fletcher left on Monday. He hugged Reeve in the driveway for a long moment, and she stood very still inside it, the way you stand when you're letting something in that you've been keeping at arm's length. He shook my hand again. He said he'd call. I think he meant it. We stood in the driveway after his rental car turned out of the street. Reeve's breath made a small cloud in the November air. She put her hands in her pockets. That was a complicated weekend, she said. You were very good. I had good material. She looked sideways at me. Was any of it real? I said, what do you think? She stood there for a moment, considering. Then she said, I think I want to find out. We went inside, not into her apartment, not into mine. We made tea in her kitchen and sat at her small table with its art supply clutter and the stack of books she was always halfway through, and we talked for 3 hours about nothing dramatic. Where I grew up, which was Moncton. Where she grew up, which was Antigonish. What she thought she'd be doing at 27. Teaching? Yes, but in a bigger city, not this small specific happiness she'd found by accident in Truro. Why I'd taken the job in Dartmouth when I could have gone to Toronto. What we were both doing with the next 10 years. In the way you talk about that. When you're starting to think. The person across the table might be in those years somehow. She fell asleep on the couch before we finished the second cup of tea. I put a blanket over her, turned off the kitchen light, and let myself out quietly. I did not go far, just upstairs. 6 weeks later, she knocked on my inside door on a Sunday morning with a coffee in each hand and said, I talked to my mom, I let her in. About us. She handed me a coffee. She said she already knew. Reeve looked slightly affronted. She said she knew the night of her birthday. She said, and I am quoting directly, that you had the face of a man trying too hard to seem like he wasn't trying at all. I thought about that. Your mother is perceptive. She's a retired school teacher. She has seen every face. I sipped my coffee. What else did she say? That she liked you. Reeve leaned against my kitchen counter. That you carried her dish without being asked, which she said is the real test. It was a heavy dish. She doesn't care. It's the principle. Reeve set her mug down and looked at me with the particular expression she had when she was deciding how much honesty to spend. She also said I seem less careful. Is that good? She meant it as good. A pause. I think I mean it as good too. I set my coffee down beside hers. Then we're agreed, I said. She smiled. Not the small, careful one she had on Thursday nights when the lights were low and she was keeping things close. The open one. The one she had when she wasn't thinking about it. Don't be smug, she said. I'm not smug. I'm concurring. She picked her coffee back up, looked out my kitchen window at the neighbor's yard and said, Your recycling schedule is terrible, by the way. I've been compensating for months. I know, I said. I was waiting for you to say something. She turned to look at me. You were not, I was. I thought. Eventually she'll tell me. That'll be a conversation. That is a bizarre way to manufacture a conversation. It worked. She stared at me. Then she laughed, full and sudden and real, and she leaned forward and kissed me in my kitchen. On a Sunday morning, with the coffee getting cold, which was exactly the right time and the right place, and nothing at all like how I'd imagined it, and somehow better. The thing about sharing walls with someone for 14 months is that you know them without meaning to. You know which mornings are hard before you've seen their face. You know the sound of a good day versus a complicated one. You know when to knock and when to leave a lime on the step and say nothing. I had known Reeve that way for over a year before I knew her any other way, and the second kind of knowing, I can tell you, is not diminished by the first. It's held up by it. We still have separate apartments. She says she needs a room where she can leave paint on things without explaining herself. I say I need somewhere to keep the alphabetized shelf she pretends to find unreasonable and secretly borrows from. We have not resolved these positions. We are in no hurry. Her porch light is on when she's home now, same as always. Sometimes mine is on too after midnight because she's upstairs and we've lost track of time. The recycling schedule has improved. The coffee cake is no longer a contingency. It is simply Tuesday. Last week I came home from a short trip to Fredericton. 2 days, one client, direct flight back into Halifax, and found a sticky note on my inside door at the top of the stairs. Blue paper, her handwriting. Come down when you're ready. I made soup. The real kind, not the canned kind. Don't panic. I stood at the top of the stairs reading it. I had driven 4 hours in the dark 14 months ago and found an open door and a woman in paint-stained overalls with red eyes, and somehow that had become this. A note on blue paper and a pot of real soup on a Tuesday. I went downstairs.